Coming to you from the Freedom Federal Credit Union Studios, Harford County Living presents Conversations with Rich Bennett.
Slow pitch transfer.
It's probably the least sexy part of the organizing. It's okay. No. The truth is...
Have you ever wondered how one woman could change not just Hollywood, but the way the world viewed women altogether? Greta Garbo wasn't just a movie star. She became a cultural phenomenon whose influence reached far beyond the silver screen. But what was it about her that made her so captivating, so mysterious, and so ahead of her time? Today, we're joined by author Scott Reisfield, whose fascinating new book, Greta Garbo, The Rise of the Modern Woman, explores the remarkable legacy of one of cinema's most iconic figures. And for those of you listening, if you've never seen any of her movies, I suggest you go watch them because they are phenomenal. Together, we're going to look beyond the glamour and uncover how Garbo challenged conventions, redefined female independence, and left an impact that still felt nearly a century later. So whether you're a classic film fan, a history buff, or simply curious about the people who shape culture in ways we don't always recognize, it's a conversation you don't want to miss. Scott, welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going well, Rich. It's not a overly hot day today. It's just summer.
Oh, phew. Yeah, I know last week, you're in what, Michigan, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
We really hot days.
Oh, it's been miserable here. I just had to MC a local 4th of July parade, co-MC it. 102 degrees outside. With the heat index, I think it was 115. And thank God as soon as, like, within minutes after the parade finished, the skies opened up. And we had some hellacious storms. So I just sat in my car and waited for those things to pass by before I headed home. But
weather, the same thing.
Oh, it's nuts. I can't stand the heat because you can look when it's too hot, you can only take so much off. But at least if it's too cold, you can keep putting layers on. It makes it a lot easier, I think. All right, so for those people that don't know, because I didn't make this known in the introduction. Your relationship to Greta Garbo. Let everybody know what that is, if you don't mind.
Sure, she was my great aunt, and what that meant for me, because I grew up in New Jersey and she was living in New York, was it like having an extra grandparent. She's 2 generations away. So I didn't have like the kind of relationship even my mom had with her, which was much more, adult to adult, but, she would come out, she would have dinner, we'd go on walks, she'd hang out. We had a pool. She would, hang out by the pool and swim. And we would go to New York and see her there. So as just someone who was in my life, and she was very close with my mom's parents.
Okay.
And those grandparents were in New Mexico, but they came east pretty frequently. And so I would see them together, and they were a hoot together.
Right. So. She was beautiful, too. I think even as she got older, just something about her was just captivating, I guess you could say. It's like she just drew you right in.
So
yeah, I just love watching those old movies too. But all right, so the book, it's simply just another, or it's not really another. Well, no, it is a biography, but it's called Greta Garbo: The Rise of the Modern Woman. So why did you want to tell her story through that particular lens?
Well, it came out of my research. This is a COVID project. I never would have had the time to write this book without COVID.
Right.
I knew that there were errors sort of in the biographies, and I thought I was going to tell, quite frankly, more of a classic Hollywood story. But as I did my research, I could see the numbers, the impact she was having. She was filling these first-run theaters for Lowe's, which is where they made all their money.
Yeah.
When you look at the film industry in the studio era and you combine the studios and the theaters, because Lowe's owned MGM, right? It separate. So people now talk about, what the movie made for the studio, but for Lowe's, the studio made a third of the money.
Right.
Another third of it was in just the first run theaters. They were incredibly profitable because it was a monopoly that kept competitors out. And the people who went to Garbo movies in these first run theaters were female clerks and nurses, the women who had jobs. This was the transition from the Victorian era, where all women's work was unpaid,
right,
in the house, to they would go out, they would work in factories, they would work as clerks, which was the good job, middle class. A female clerk made less than a male clerk, because that's the way it's always been, but made more than almost all the other men working.
Wow.
Right? So it was a great job. And they went to movies, and they loved Garbo.
Wow. So with the research, I guess you really had a benefit that a lot of other people didn't with some of these biographies because of her being your great aunt, right?
Oh, it absolutely helped. I have letters she sent to my grandmother. I have some letters she kept that revealed really important things. But I think part of it really was I had a sense of who she was. I knew a couple of stories were wrong. And I knew that sort of, if you will, the depth of research I had to do to unpeel things, because you'd find an article in the 30s and somebody would say something. And you would go, well, is that possible? So, for instance, Lillian Gish would write in her autobiography, well, Garbo's sister died, and she had been on Lillian Gish's set, because the Scarlet Letter co-star was Lars Hansen, who was a friend of hers.
Okay.
So Lillian Gish says her sister died, and she burst into tears in my arms, as we talked about it, more or less. Well, when Garbo found out her sister had died, Lillian Gish was in New York. So, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people wanted to be part of the Garbo story because it helped you. If you were close to Garbo, it was a good thing. And so I had to find the real stories. And some stories I have no idea whether they're real or not.
Right.
And some stories I could say, no, that's not real. And I can, there's some pretty concrete basis for saying it, other than, well, I don't like the story. I mean, sometimes I don't like the story, but it's true. So it gave me a new, I found a lot of it on my own, but to challenge it came from my family, I guess I would say. I knew there was a lot that was wrong. So I really kept digging on things.
Wow.
There were a lot of archives I had to go back to twice, because I learned stuff and I'd come back and I'd sift it and put it in an organization. And I'd say, but I still don't understand this. And I'll go, I got to go back to Wisconsin, to the university, and go into this file a little deeper. But I could do that because I had the time.
Well, yeah, I think everybody had a lot of time during COVID. Well, and that's the thing, because you wrote this during COVID, and I've always, and we've mentioned COVID a lot because, well, it happened. But I think a lot of good things came out of it. And if COVID didn't happen, this book would have never came out, probably, right?
Right. I would not have had the time. I would have not shut down the company I had started.
And you probably wouldn't have learned so much about your great aunt as well.
Right. I had learned a lot sort of along the way. I ran my own company before I sold it. Then I went to work for an association, and then I came out to Michigan and worked for a company that got sold. And I had just started another really small company. The only other companies tried to conquer the world.
Mm-hmm.
My last company, I wanted a nice little niche business that wouldn't take up 60 hours a week. So
Nice.
well, yeah, except it didn't survive.
Oh.
But but so I wrote a book 20 years ago that was about photographs, and so I did some research for that. And Garbo collected her own photographs.
I was going to say that was on her as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I did some research because I wrote an essay for it, and so that started me. And then I traveled for work, and I would go to LA, and I would just add an extra day and do a little research.
Okay.
Because I started doing photo research there and realized there were all these other things, and I was just curious, but it wasn't organized with the intent, right? It was just for my own knowledge.
Right.
But I'd done enough to have some idea of where I might go with a book.
Okay.
So then COVID happens, and I can't go to the archives, though I know I have to, but I can do all the library research because my libraries here in Michigan, really were accommodating. I could access through the University of Michigan all of their online resources as an alum, as if I was in the library. I mean, usually they geofence it, right?
Right.
You have to be in the library to do the library stuff. During COVID, they just gave me access. And there are a lot of things, old articles. I read a lot about photography and how it evolved as an art,
Mm-hmm.
most of which didn't make it into my book because it was sort of like long enough already. But it got reduced to a couple of paragraphs. But all of that research about reading about photography theory and how the technology changed and all that, I did online.
Wow.
And so there were a lot of things I could do that set me up for going to archives with real intent. So now I'm going to these physical archives, and, so Washington, you're outside of DC, I would go to the Library of Congress.
Right.
I would go to Catholic University, which has the archives of the Catholic Church and all of the censorship archives related to the Catholic Church. And then Georgetown, which has the archives of one of the main Catholic censorship advocates who also published a trade magazine. So, and so I went to Washington twice. The first time I got sort of a taste of everything.
Right.
I didn't know that Georgetown stuff was there. So it was just at Catholic University and Library of Congress. And I'd missed some stuff at the Library of Congress. So I went back, did that. I'd learned about Georgetown because I took all the research I'd done at Catholic University, and it was like, well, can I find the personal papers of any of these key players?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, at Georgetown, there's Martin Quigley's stuff. So I could go back to Washington. And, I think a lot of writers try to get it all done in one trip.
Right.
And you can't. I mean, sometimes you can. It's great if you can. But if you got to go twice, you just got to go twice.
Well, it's amazing that you're going to all these different places, whereas, some authors will only use one source. But you're going to all, I would have never heard of the Catholic one or even Georgetown, but yeah. That's, wow, that's amazing. So when you were doing the research, was there a moment when you actually realized that this book wasn't going to, or it was going to be different from everything else that's been written about her?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, just sticking with the stuff in DC, is I realized she was central to the censorship battles. Yeah. And people don't think of it that way because they don't understand how Queen Christina triggered conservatives, and led, not by itself. Other films also triggered them,
Right.
but it really triggered them, not just for the sex, but for the woman in authority. She was a queen, and she didn't behave the way, Martin Quigley thought a queen should behave.
Right.
And it was a bad role model for women. So, well, because censorship was about the sex, but it was also about politics
Yes.
and labor and everything. How a woman should act in society. So, from Queen Christina through the costume dramas that she did had no censorship problems, but that's because Thalberg and Garbo cleverly subverted censorship. They are, the censors think, look, she's paying the ultimate price. She's dying for her bad behavior. And yet the audience just loved her all the more because she was true to her heart, And then most people know her last film was an issue, but it was an issue because the Legion of Decency, which was a Catholic social pressure group, condemned it.
Was that Two-Faced Woman?
Yeah,
Okay.
Two-Faced Woman. They had to pull it and re-edit it to get it approved, which they did. It kind of destroyed the film story because it gives away the plot in a way. Once Melvin Douglas realizes that the two women are really one woman, then what's the point of the story other than, well, we already have it in the can, so we got to release it. But what is really was completely missed was that Garbo tried for 15 years to make films, and censorship was not the only issue. There were some other issues with these projects, but censorship, the inability to get a script approved, and concerns about what it would take to get a script approved was probably the number one issue for these. I found 7 projects that she had absolutely agreed to do or signed a contract to do, right? She's signing contracts in 1955 to do films.
In 1955?
1955.
Wow.
Well, technically, it was a TV special.
Okay.
She was doing an Easter TV special, and it was going to be very serious. When Samuel Beckett is one of the screenwriters you're considering, you're talking serious drama. But it was going to be an Easter special. The story is The Miracle, which is an old Gottfried Reinhardt play, very successful, and approved by the Catholic Church. And there was a silent film of it, which was also approved by the Catholic Church. But the storyline in 1955 runs afoul of the Catholic Church because a nun leaves a convent to go, commit sins for a decade.
Oh, wow.
And then returns. But while she's gone, a statue of the Virgin Mary steps down and takes her place in the convent. Okay, that's the broad brush story.
Yeah.
And so they ran this script by some people in the church to get their, who were associated with the production code administration, but not of it. And they were like, well, a nun can't sin, so it's got to be a novice. And she can't willingly leave the convent. She's got to be taken away. All these little things about how they want to, govern how it's done.
Yeah.
So film doesn't get made. And that's one of the reasons, but it's also not the only reason. The film sort of evolved from a TV special, which would have been interesting, to a CinemaScope spectacular. And when they came to Garbo with this new script, she was like, no, this is crazy. It becomes this big... George Schley, who was her romantic partner and advisor at the time, because he had a theater background, he wrote back, I don't see how this can't be schmaltzy. It's not a Garbo type of thing. so, so partly, and there's some reasons you can see on the production side. There were two people involved in the production, and the guy with a better sense of the moment and ability to land a deal left, right?
Okay.
So then it was just Norman Bel Geddes, and he just doesn't have that touch. Whereas Harry Saltzman is just a master of making things happen. He made Look Back in Anger, and he got Richard Burton to do it at half his price, right? He's just the guy who can do these things. And he would end up founding, with the Broccoli's, the James Bond franchise, right? So he had a real good sense of the industry and what would work and how to cut the deal. And then he was out. So the thing didn't get made.
All right. So, because you said Miracle was 1955, but it never got completed, right?
It never got started.
Oh, it never got started. Okay.
It actually got made by a completely different production team 2 years later.
All right.
Starring Roger Moore.
So with her last film being Two-Face Woman, that was 1941?
41, yes.
41, but yet she was still, I guess, working, trying to get some things done. Was there anything that was ever filmed afterwards that may be like lost files or something?
Just a screen test.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, some of the projects, like the one I really wish was made is both Katharine Hepburn and George Cukor, the director, recount a meeting they had with Garbo and Louis B. Mayer to pitch Morning Becomes Electra. And the idea of Hepburn and Garbo and Morning Becomes Electra, to me, is like, well, that has potential. But Mayer turned them down. And partly I understand Mayer, because I don't know that the audience was there for that at that time, in 1942, 43.
Yeah.
So, partly it's, the industry was changing. It was changing in terms of the audience with the war and the kind of film they wanted. The society was becoming more conservative, and that's one of the things I talk about. Garbo doesn't become more conservative. She's very socially liberal.
Right.
And she is sticking, to, I want to play interesting women, but there isn't a market for that until the 70s, really.
Oh, yeah, it's true, yeah. Wow.
And I think the other thing is the studio system starts to fall apart. So there isn't this, I think Garbo really benefited from the fact that, especially under Thalberg at MGM, but even after Thalberg, like everything just happened for her.
Mm-hmm.
She picked a project, either they brought it to her or she brought it to them. And once they agreed and signed a contract, it all just kind of happened. She would approve the co-stars and the directors, and she had to look at stuff and look at costumes and things. But she was cosseted in MGM in a good way for her, because she had power in the system, unlike some poor starlet who's, trying to make it and has no power and is just being abused. She sort of skated right past that because her career had already taken off when she got to MGM. But once that starts to fall apart and you're looking for funding different places, after the war, she's working with these independent producers, or even during the war, for Women of the Sea. They're patching together the financing and, where do we find the props and the filming locations and all this. That used to just happen for her. And she's not an Orson Welles or a Charlie Chaplin who had always understood all the elements of the film. She was willing to go there, because I have a letter where she, writes to her sister-in-law, my grandmother, we'll move back to Sweden, we'll buy a farm, and I'll make movies. So it's not that it wasn't something she didn't contemplate, even though she didn't do it, but she would have had to learn a lot. It would have been a different exercise for her.
That era, and she started, 22?
Well,
film?
um,
I
her
can't.
first theatrical film is technically 22,
Okay.
but it's like a Max Sennett knockoff comedy. Her first real film, and she did industrial films
Right.
before that. So, she's on film in 1920, but her first theatrical film is Josta Berling in 1924.
24.
So
Okay.
the start of her career. Now she's gone through Dramaten. She's picked up all this training that she didn't have. And, she's becoming a fully formed actor.
Right. Well,
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, and by 1925, she is.
Mhm.
I mean, by 1925, she's one of the best actors in the world. And by 1927, she's the best actor in the world.
Well, and that's what I wanted to bring up, because every generation, they seem to have that one celebrity who is just larger than life. And she was definitely it. She was larger than life. But what do you think made her that person during her era?
Oh, it's her acting.
Yeah.
So she's trained as a naturalistic actor, what we think of today in what I'll call a serious film, right? You're inhabiting the character. You are the character on screen. Well, that's not what acting was in the early 20s. It was much more theatrical, sort of vaudevillian, over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you just watch somebody kiss in these early films, it's these sort of fakey kisses.
Yeah.
Kisses somebody, and it's a kiss, and that's what her audience thought, that it was real, that they were in the room with her, and that they understood the thoughts her character was thinking.
Yeah.
And it was their thoughts, what they would have thought. So,
and the thing is, too, because she was so damn good, even people today, if you go back and watch them, it still feels that way.
Well,
at least to me.
There's a genuineness of her resonating with her age.
Yeah.
And parallel to today is Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift just resonates with her audience because she is them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. All right, so with Greta Garbo, I know a lot of people call her Garbo. I just always like saying Greta Garbo, but with Greta Garbo, there were a lot of myths out there. So, were there any that you were especially surprised to discover that weren't actually true?
Well, I think a lot of the myths about Garbo are sort of caricatures of her actual personality.
Mm-hmm.
She was a private person. She really preferred to be thought of as an actor, not a celebrity. So all the celebrity stuff, she didn't care about, and actually found it interfered. All the, following around and asking about her private life and stuff. She just thought it was not what she was offering. And, unfortunately, that's just not the way the world works. So, it's interesting. I just read a great biography of Joan Crawford. And in Hollywood, Joan Crawford went to whatever the popular hangout was, where the press looked for stars to be.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of her, self-promotion of her image. Garbo never did that. She didn't. Well, first off, she didn't have to, because she already had more publicity than anyone else in the world, right? So what was she going to do? Add 1% to that?
Yeah.
And it also didn't fit with her conception of what she was. She was an actor playing roles, right? So she would talk about them. I mean, she did give interviews early in her career to the film magazines, later in her career, when she would come back from Sweden to make a movie, she'd give an interview in New York in the salon of the ship. That was her interview.
Yeah.
It just appeared in the New York Times instead of photoplay. So she was aware of the. Here's actually one of the things I realized about her that was it's there and you just don't notice it. So after her last film, she sat for a number of photographers and she wasn't working on films. I mean, she was trying to work on films, but she didn't have a project that was being actively filmed.
Okay.
So she would sit with Cecil Beaton innumerable times, and he would always release the photos. She sat with George Honington Hune, Horst Horst, and Anthony Beauchamp. And she was curating her image, right?
Uh-huh.
Until the mid-'60s. She just wasn't talking about it.
God, the thing is with her, as powerful as she was, and it'd just be interesting to see how she would handle everything today, especially with social media and everything and paparazzi everywhere. I have a funny feeling she would end up just telling a lot of people off, saying, "Get out of my face," or whatever.
There are actors today who aren't that different. It's just that it doesn't get turned into this recluse meme that she was turned into, which was just a marketing thing. So my example is Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster's life is incredibly private. You don't know what she's doing day to day. She shows up to talk about the project she's just about to release. So she does the marketing, but then she disappears. And I think Garbo would have been kind of the same way. Yeah,
that is true. You really don't hear anything about her as Jodie Foster as much as you used to. And she is very private. And there are a lot of them out there that are very private, and I love that. A lot of people think they have to be on social media and they don't. A lot of your best actors and actresses are, still doing work, but they're not on social media at all. With Greta Garbo, and I mentioned Two-Faced Woman before, and with that being her last film, what was it? Why was it that she didn't do anything afterwards? Or was it that she was actually looking, but just, was that film like The Dagger? You know what I mean?
No, it really wasn't, because she immediately signed to do another film with MGM. She signed to make a film called The Girl from Leningrad, which was a remake of a Russian film that had just come out.
Okay.
Which is about a nurse on the Russian side of the Finnish War. Right. So it's a woman in a leadership position and a romance kind of combined. And the guy who was the producer for that, Bernie Hyman, had a heart attack in late 1942. They were just about to go into production. She had already been paid her advance. She had a contract. And when Hyman died, Louis B. Mayer killed the project and offered to pay her the rest of the salary, and she turned him down because she wasn't doing the work.
Oh, wow.
So contractually, she should have been paid. But I think there's another issue where events were changing, right? Maybe the Russians weren't the best Hollywood story at that time.
Right.
It was kind of a war story, but, with an independent woman. And also, that's not Louis B. Mayer's personal kind of thing.
Okay.
I don't know how or why he made the decision, but, so she was that committed to a film. She was ready to film it.
Wow.
For something like Women of the Sea, which was a story kind of lifted from history of a Norwegian freighter captained by a woman with a female crew dealing with the Germans at the start of World War II. And what happened there is it was a female leadership film that sort of morphed into more of a romance as the writing got done. And Garbo walked away from it because she had script approval. Now, she was castigated by friends for that because her good friend Salka Vertel had been the screenwriter, and some people said you should have just gone through with it because you've hurt Salka's career by walking away, which is actually kind of true.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is that sort of that moment for the Germans are attacking kind of movie was being replaced by the Allied victory movies, because the war was turning.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of missed the window for that story. And a number of people told her that directly. I mean, that's written down. And when Lester Cowan, who was the producer, went to try to get financing for it without Garbo, that's the reason people turned him down, is, you missed the window for this story. But originally she was going to bet. She signed the contract. And, she writes in letters to my grandmother, I'm going to be going to Canada, for a month to make this film. Do you want to stay at my house? Because she's always trying to get the rest of the family to move back to LA. That's pretty concrete.
Yeah.
She was going to make, she signed to make a film on George Sand. And again, Salka wrote the script. George Sand was a bisexual, cross-dressing French author. So when the lavender scare starts, right, and people are being fired from jobs in America for being homosexual,
right,
Garbo's response is to make a film about George Sand, right, which is her idea of a political stance, I think.
Yeah.
But the movie gets transformed into a film titled Duchess de Langeais, same contract, just a different film, right? They just changed the project. And she actually did screen tests for Duchess, right? They were trying to figure out which of the great cameramen they were going to use for the project. And those screen tests exist. Right?
Oh.
They're from 1948. And you can see them online. They're on YouTube. And there are three different fantastic cinematographers. And, so she had a contract. She was going to make the film. And this is one of the films they were going to Italy for financing from Rizzoli. And literally a week before that meeting.
You're listening to Conversations with Rich Bennett. We'll be right back. One thing that I always tell people is this: your pets are family. And when you trust somebody to come into your home and take care of them, you want someone who's going to care for them the same way you would. That's exactly why I love Nicole Wilson and her team at Sits and Wiggles Pet Care. Nicole has been part of the Conversations with Rich Bennett family for years, and I've watched her grow this business into one of the most trusted pet care companies in Harford County. Whether it's dog walking, cat sitting, pet visits, or even caring for more unique animals, Nicole and her team truly care about every pet they work with. And honestly, if I had a pet right now, Sits and Wiggles would absolutely be my first call. So if you're looking for reliable, trustworthy, compassionate pet care from people who genuinely love animals, visit sitsandwiggles.com. Again, that's sitsandwiggles.com.
Walter Wanger, who's the producer, gets a letter from the Production Code Administration telling him there's no way in hell we're approving, and here's 13 pages of why.
Wow.
So he goes into this financing meeting knowing he doesn't have a script. And I wasn't in the room, but my guess is he killed it. He didn't tell anybody what his problem was, but he just took a hard line in negotiations, so they fell apart.
Wow.
And blamed on Garbo. It was all supposed to be her fault, but she had nothing to do with the script. And the project would eventually die. And there's later correspondence. There's a fascinating letter from Eugene Franke, who was the other producing guy, back to Walter Wanger, when they're looking at two different financing options in the fall of 1949, saying, I prefer this one because he'll fund the project without a script. And as you know, that's been our problem all along. So, and she had signed an extension, like, if you can make all the money happen by December 31st, they'll do the project. They couldn't, so she walked away. So, but there are a number of, and then there are things that, I mean, she had a very good sense of what was appropriate for her.
Right.
Tennessee Williams talks about pitching her on a project called The Pajama Game, which is a story of lust, not love. Garbo's response is, it's great, but it's not for me. Give it to Joan Crawford. And it's a Joan Crawford story. She would have been a good fit. It never got turned into a film, I don't believe, at least not at that time.
Right.
But she had a sense of, well, that's not my kind of project. I Remember Mama was not her kind of project. So she would look at these and just turn them down. They're not interesting women of the kind she wants to play.
But the amazing thing with that is, too, it's as if she knew who to recommend for that. Like her recommending Joan Crawford for The Pajama Game. And I have a funny feeling there were other actors that she knew would fill a role better than, say, herself.
Yeah, I mean, she was a student of her craft.
Yeah.
And I mean, she knew an amazing number of people who were, the important people in that industry socially.
Yeah.
And, even at MGM, I found this fascinating story someone told of and it's not a Garbo film, it's somebody else's film, and they're sitting around waiting to go to a preview, right? Because Thalberg always run the preview to see how the audience reacted and then edit. So she's sitting there with Mayer, Thalberg, John Gilbert, who she's not dating anymore, and the director, and they're just talking, and it's sort of interesting. It's not even her film, but she's comfortable with management,
right?
And management is comfortable with her.
I have a funny feeling she probably could have been either a hell of a producer or even a director with some films.
Yeah,
that's just my guess.
Yeah, that's one of those speculations I like.
All right, so with the title of the book, when people hear The Rise of the Modern Woman, what do you hope they understand by that phrase?
Well, the position of women in the world keeps evolving. And when you go back to the pre-industrial age, women ran the home because it was a full-time job.
Yeah.
Right. There was laundry day, right? It took a whole day to do the laundry. Now you toss it in the machine and it cycles while you do something else.
Yeah.
So women were freed up and entered the mainstream. There used to be literally two separate spheres, the female sphere at home and the male sphere, and they didn't interact much. To the point, somebody pointed out that if you look at photos from like the 1900, early 1900, before 1910, photos of the city, there are very few women, right? Women didn't go, right? So it all starts to change. Women are getting educated. So they're going to school. Garbo went to primary school and stopped because there was no school for women beyond that. You're 15, out of here. And so women are getting educated. They're entering the workforce, and their lives are transitioning. So even though in the 30s, once women were married, they didn't have, a legally separate life from their husband. So there's a lot that had not changed. Everything up to marriage had been totally transformed, right? The women went out and worked. Not all women. I mean,
Right.
some women, got married because their husband introduced them to it, or their parents introduced them to their future husband, and poof, it was done. But there was a much greater percentage of women who were dating. Dating didn't exist in the 19th century. Dating is a 20th century creation, maybe late 19th century. Now there are amusement parks, there are movie theaters, there's cafes, there's more money, so you have the money to do these things. It's not subsistence world. And so women have this independence they've never had before. They're choosing their own romantic partners. They're choosing among romantic partners. I'll date this guy, I'll date that guy, and choose. All of these things transform how women view themselves, how they fit into their relationship with their spouse, and their view of what they should be able to get in the world. And their view of, you had this Victorian sexual purity thing, right? One guy ever, and that just goes away. And so you have women looking at the process of getting to marriage in a totally different way, even though you can look at marriage in the 1930s and say, well, what changed? Nothing. Right? So it's kind of true, but kind of not true. You don't get real. And again, it becomes more socially conservative because with the Depression, one of the driving things was women are taking men's jobs, right? Because there are only so many jobs. And the idea that two people in this family work, but nobody in this other family works, did seem unfair to some people, because there wasn't enough work to go around. And then, the men go off to war and women work, but when the men come back, it's sort of like, well, they've sacrificed, so we give them stuff. And also with the nuclear era, I think there was a lot of fear that, the world could end any day. And so it came down to, the family castle. And it's not, again, until the 70s that you start to see a reemergence of this idea that women should get a different deal than they currently. But the deal wasn't the same deal all along. And so what Garbo changed was that first part of the deal, that before marriage part. And women look to her and Irma Scher's doing kind of the same thing once she sees what Garbo's doing. And Joan Crawford's doing, and lots of women.
Right.
And before Garbo, these stories were being told in magazines. The farm girls goes to the city, is pursued by one guy, but he's a creep, and she finds her true love. They're telling these stories in the 1880s, but they're not having the same impact Garbo has because they don't seem as real as Garbo. So it's not that the stories aren't being told before her or by other people. It's just that she's better at it.
With all of the research, everything that you found, and especially stuff that you didn't know before, if she was around and you could actually sit down with her, like, let's say you're still writing the book, but you have all the research done, you got everything done, it's getting ready to go to press, but the publisher's like, all right, Scott, we want you to sit down with Greta Garbo and interview her. Is there one particular question you would love to ask her?
Yeah, and it's not what I think anybody would think. Tell me about Charlie Chaplin.
Oh, my God.
We're friends for ages. And so I start my book with this quote from Louis B. Mayer, which is totally unfair to Chaplin, who he hated. He says, the cinema has delivered precisely one great artist to the world, Greta Garbo, unless you count that damn mouse. So yeah, Disney is, an incredible talent, and Garbo's an incredible talent. Well, Charlie Chaplin, to me, that's the triumvirate of that era.
Yeah.
And she and Chaplin knew each other over decades. And, I have found other people tell stories of, the two of them playing charades at a party. And I would like to know what she thought of what I would say is, her peer.
Yeah.
What was Chaplin like? What was your relationship with Chaplin like? What did you learn from him? I think that would be fascinating.
Oh my God. I would love to sit down with dinner with them two, along with Buster Keaton. And oh my God, I'm going to forget his name. Fats. Fatty Garbo, was it?
Yeah.
I would just love to sit down with them and just talk. Just talk and I think it would be amazing. Simply amazing. All right, so you wrote this during COVID. How long did it actually take you to write? Once you put pen to paper and you started, how long did it take?
3 years.
Wow.
Because so the first part of writing was just laying all the facts into a document. So I wrote it as paragraphs, but a lot of it was get the information. And I used a program called Scrivener where you can move things around incredibly easily.
Okay.
Right? It's a writing program that its main attribute is you can change things in order, and it's really easy to do. And like if I write something in Scrivener and I erase it, I can send it to sort of like a closet, so it still lives there. It's not like in Word, when you delete something, it's gone.
Right.
Right. So in Scrivener, when you delete something, it's just exiled. And sometimes that was useful. And I did change the order of my book, and there are things that I dropped out, like the photography section, and because it's a long book.
Oh yeah.
And the photography is cool, but it's not on the main thread I ended up on. And I didn't write as much about her later life because, while I know it interests a lot of people, it just wasn't on the main thread.
It's another book.
Yeah, it's another book, or at least something. But so once I had everything, I realized I had too much in a business sense, and I also realized this is where it's sort of like, well, I really missed this,
right?
Or what happened during this time period? Is there any information? Or, hey, look, A, B, and C. I never thought of that as A, B, and C before. How do I flesh this out? For instance, I learned she had pernicious anemia, which is a lifelong condition, and she never talked about it. And it's barely written about, but I could find it in early articles from when it came on, and literally made her stop making a project. She had to stop working for a month to get healthy, and the project she was working on, they just scrapped all the film and started over when she was healthy. So, but it's sort of like, oh, this is because of this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I knew the project had been scrapped, but it was somewhat unclear as to why, right? Because they used to do that sometimes. They're like, oh, we have a better idea or whatever. But it's like, no, she was sick. And then what I realized is you can see the effect of pernicious anemia, which really saps a person's energy, is, I guess, the best way I put it. This woman I spoke to about the condition from the Pernicious Anemia Society had this great descriptor. She said, if your body's like a battery and you exert energy, into your everyday life, and also sometimes exert more because you're working on something hard. Pernicious anemia, you just don't have as much battery, and you just don't have as much surge capacity, right?
Oh.
So it's just very draining. And so you see with Garbo these very deliberate gaps in her work. And people would say, well, she couldn't film this day, right? So it's like, well, she's sick all the time. It's like, yeah, she's sick all the time. So she misses days of filming in projects. So they'll say, she missed, I'm making these up because I can't remember each film, but she misses 6 days of filming on The Conquest. And for 3 days, they found other things to shoot. And for 3 days, they just had to cancel for the day. So she's managing this condition, and I never, knew that until I could piece it together by first seeing, okay, people are saying she has pernicious anemia in these press articles for literally 6 months, and then it never gets mentioned again.
And how old was she when she was diagnosed with that?
21.
21.
Yeah. So, but that's how, my editing process, I could then sort of frame in, oh, okay, so now these things make sense to me. I understand what's going on. And when someone says, well, she's a hypochondriac, it's like, well, no, you just don't know what she has.
And correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm wondering if this is an actual fact, if this is what caused it. Didn't she have tics?
No.
She didn't. Okay, for some reason, I thought I saw something where she was on the set and she had tics, and they had to slow it down in slow motion.
I think that's a misremembered thing someone said years after. So when they made Joyless Street, they used stocks of film for two different characters, right? Mm-hmm. To realize the difference of their stories. It's sort of like an Altman film of interlocking stories.
Right.
And two of the actresses, Garbo and Asta Nielsen, who is this spectacular Danish actress, they never meet in the film, but it's about them, right? It's about the differences of how the inflation destroys their lives. The Garbos doesn't get as destroyed because she finds
right.
But Nielsen's life is destroyed. But so they use two different film stocks, and the guy who made that comment about the tics says, well, she had this tic and they had to slow down the film to capture. And what he didn't realize is, no, they're just using a totally different film stock to get a different look from her as Nielsen on scene, because she's already made movies.
Yeah.
Right? She's been working in film since 1920, but they don't understand that. This guy doesn't understand how much time she spent on film. So he's sort of going, well, we changed something. He's saying this like in 1950, whatever. And he settles on, well, we slowed it down because she had a tic in her eye. But I don't see, she never had a tic in her eye anywhere else on film.
Okay.
It's very strange. That's one of those stories that, could it be true?
Yeah.
I guess it could be. I mean, I can't say definitively, right? Because I wasn't there. But nobody corroborates it. It never occurs in the rest of her professional life. So, maybe, but I don't think so.
With and I forget, God, I'm not going to even try to pronounce it. The disease she had, what was it?
Pernicious anemia. So anemia is just like iron deficient blood, and you have it for a variety of reasons. But pernicious anemia, your body doesn't process what's called the intrinsic factor that sort of creates the iron-laden blood, right? The tool that your body uses to make the iron be in your blood to go around to all the cells, it just doesn't happen. So your blood just doesn't carry enough iron out to where it goes.
Now, is it still pretty rare, or?
It's rare. It's about a 1 in 1,000 thing, and it's manageable.
Okay.
Right? Garbo was fortunate because the way to manage the disease, there was no way to manage it until 1925.
Okay.
She was diagnosed in 27, so she could at least get treatments, which were not pretty to start.
Yeah.
I mean, the initial treatment was a pound of raw liver a day, which people used to eat in shakes, like you drink it. But quickly evolved to shots, and then, better shots. So basically today, the treatment is B12 shots. And B12 wasn't even identified until the 40s. So they were just kind of Yeah, I mean, they figured out liver worked. They didn't know why.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, but it worked. So doing. So she had to manage this on a daily basis, and also like for projects. It's one of the reasons she took breaks between projects is because she needed to recover. And to me, that also speaks to how important telling these stories was.
Yeah.
I mean, she really paid a price for gearing up to do the work. And she was happy to do so because that's what she felt driven to do.
So what do you hope readers take away after they finish reading the book?
You know, there are a lot of women who, when you read women's history, you can stories of women who, you know, back a century ago took steps, did things, said things to further the independence and sort of modern status of women. And I think when you look back to the first half of the 20th century, Garbo's one of the 5, maybe 10 women who were most important in making those changes. She's really central to how this evolved, you know, with an Eleanor Roosevelt and an Amelia Earhart and, other people.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're interested in that and how women got to today and how, quite frankly, you know, history rhymes. I mean, women are facing a lot of the same issues today they faced a century ago, just in different clothing. So that's the thing that's interesting is that she's one of these women. And then on top of that, especially her early life, you know, getting her to MGM is just a fascinating young life.
With this book, who do you think will be surprised most by it? Either the classic movie fans, historians, or people who've never seen a Greta Garbo film?
I think people who read women's history, because, I understand why if you're reading women's history, you know, the whole suffragette movement is important because it is. And, you know, they take these physical actions, you know, they get, you know, thrown in prison sometimes and go on hunger strikes. And it's an amazing life and story. But, you know, here is someone taking an art form, film, and using it to an end rather effectively. And it's transforming the lives of women.
Yeah.
And in a global sense. I mean, I always found it interesting. In Japan, during World War II, the Garbo fans had to hide their collections of Garbo photographs because she was Anglo, right? Not Asian. But they and kept them, right? Because she was the modern woman. And you know, so in a place like, you know, Brazil, I'll say, you know, were women who were clerks. It was a smaller percentage of the population than in Europe or the United States or Canada or Australia, but it still existed. And so even though these markets weren't as developed in terms of women's rights, there was still an element of that. In China, there was an element of that. It was small compared to the Chinese countryside who didn't even know what a movie was. But it had this worldwide impact among the people that mattered, in terms of the evolution of our culture, and that's what's interesting. And again, it's not that she is the only person alone, but she is an exemplar for women, and it changed things.
All right. So for somebody that's never seen a Greta Garbo film, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Scott. What film do you suggest that they watch first and why?
I would say Ninotchka because it ages well. You know, some of the costume dramas, I mean, the acting in Camille is impeccable, but it does feel a little dated in terms of, you know, women's, you know, you have to buy into the repression of women in the, you know, late 19th century and what Anna or what Camille's life would have been like. So in some ways, it's not as accessible, though it's a great film. But Ninotchka is the jokes still land in Ninotchka.
Man, I'm going to have to go watch that now. I have a funny feeling I'm going to be sitting down tonight watching a couple of her films. It's funny because our local community cable network here, which is Hartford TV, I'm the one that supplies them with a movie or 2 movies every month that are in the public domain. Thank God a lot of her movies are in the public domain and people can watch them.
Well, then in the public domain, you have to go back to Anna Christie.
Oh, yeah.
Which is her hockey film, which is now in the public domain. And, this is an interesting film because she plays a sex worker who's reforming her life, right? She's gotten busted in St. Paul and she's decided to go straight. So she goes to, her dad in New York, and it's very straightforward. I mean, it's very clear in the film that she was working as a sex worker, and the question is, so can she fall in love with a guy? Is that going to be okay? And that's a pretty modern topic even today, I think. And they're doing this in 1930. They're doing Eugene O'Neill plays for film, pretty highbrow stuff, and they're just filming the play. It's not a very, there are no costumes, there's no elaborate sets. It's pretty play-like, and it's great. It's great acting, and not just Garbo. So Marie Dressler is her foil as a female in this film, playing an older former sex worker as well.
Right.
They're having this 12-minute conversation towards the start of the film that sets everything up. And it's just 2 fantastic actors at work. Dressler does this thing. So Garbo orders drinks for them, and Dressler's got a beer, and she keeps reaching for the beer, but she knows that since Garbo bought the drinks, Garbo should drink first. So she keeps reaching for her beer and then pulling her hand back and reaching for her beer, but she does it so well. It's just this incredibly wonderful little sub routine in the overall conversation. But that's a really good film. It's a little heavy, but it's good and in the public domain.
I'll have to pull that one then and send it. All right. So where can people purchase the book and follow you?
Sure. I'm online under my name, scottreisfield.com. And the book is, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but I'm present on social media, but I'm not a social media heavy user.
Right.
But I appreciate it. And it's a great way to keep in touch and show people what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
My is available all the places you normally can buy a book. You can order it through your bookstore if you want to support your local bookstore, and the normal online selling sites, all of them, because I wanted to make it as broadly available as possible.
And all of you listening, you know what I'm going to tell you already. Once you purchase Greta Garbo, The Rise of the Modern Woman, make sure you leave a full review after you read it. Everywhere that you can leave a review. Take a photo of yourself with the book, post it on social media, tag Scott in it, tag myself, tell everybody about this book, and don't get rid of it. Don't pass it on, because I think you're going to go back and read it again and again, just like you're going to go back and watch the Greta Garbo movies, so you can go back and read the book. Purchase the book for some other people as well. And, God, you're going to love it. Just something about her is, like I said before, she's very captivating. She's amazing. And everything that she did was just out of this world. So, Scott, before you pick the last question, is there anything you would like to add?
I would like to add, we've covered a lot of ground. I think I'm sure I could find something to talk about, but I'm happy with where we've gone.
I was going to say there's a lot we could talk about with just her in general. And I'm sure even about yourself, because actually I would love for you to come back on, because when you said you had your own business, we never said what kind of business it was. And I'm always fascinated by people that start their own businesses, whether they have to shut them down or not. It's that entrepreneur. And now you're an authorpreneur. So
yes.
you didn't drop the preneur part.
Yeah, the preneur part is what authors now are.
Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking, we had talked about photography. Garbo came to New York in July of 1925, and portrait photography was very static.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming from the painted portrait heritage. And in fact, that early in portrait photography, they used to include, elements of a person's life sort of in the background, so you knew who they were.
Yeah.
And Garbo comes to New York in 1925 and acts for the camera. And it's actually 3 different portrait sessions. And you can see the evolution of what they're doing with this photographer, Arnold Genthe, who is one of the world's great photographers. And these photos are stunning. And you can see them. And you can see all of Genthe's photography because he donated his entire archive to the Library of Congress, which is one of the reasons I was there. But he takes these photos, and it's just people sitting. Sometimes they're in costume if they're actors. But he also has dance photography. He photographs modern dance, and he's trying to capture the emotion the dancer is expressing. Well, with Garbo, he melds those together. He has the portraits of Garbo are very emotional, right? She's expressing an emotion, sometimes incredibly dramatically.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the photographer's being removed, that it's the subject, Garbo, communicating with the viewer. And they're very powerful, fantastic photos. And then he goes back to just doing regular portraits for the most part. But it's that photography session that leads to, all the Richard Avedon, these advertising photos where they're trying to capture emotion in an instant. Well, that starts with Garbo. And
Wow.
the line, you can go to the Library of Congress and Google Garbo and Genthe, and you can see these photos.
Interesting. And actually, your first book was a collection of her photos, right?
Yes, she kept her MGM photos, not all of them, because I think I know somebody stole some, but also one time, I think she left a box or 2 behind because they got sold at a department store in LA.
Now, can people still get that book?
Yeah, it's available as an ebook.
Okay.
Because I put it up as an ebook. The photos don't render quite as well as the paper book, but the paper book you have to buy used. And I think it's like $25 or $30 these days.
And what was the name of the book?
Greta Garbo, Portraits from Her Private Collection.
Okay.
It was a museum exhibit at about 5 or 6 different museums.
Oh, wow. Oof. Man. All right. So, Scott, I need you to pick a number between 1 and 5.
4.
4. All right. Now, once I find block 4, I need you to pick a number between 61 and 80.
72.
72. All right. So just to let you know, the listeners know this, but I have 100 different questions here, and I always have the guests pick these 2 numbers. I never know what the question is going to be. And a lot of times it aligns with what we've been talking about in a way. And I think this does. You said 72, right?
Yes.
If you could witness any historical event firsthand, which one would it be?
I would go with the First Battle of Bull Run.
Wow. I was not expecting that. What?
I'm a bit of a
Why?
historian. Well, because it was fascinating. They thought it was going to be so easy,
Yeah.
right? And they didn't understand how deadly war had become. So I just think it would be fascinating, if I could be like the hidden camera observer, like nobody's shooting me. And then you have the people who would come down from Washington. So I lived in the D.C. area in Northern Virginia for a couple of years and did my battlefield tours.
Okay.
But I just think of all the battles, this was sort of this transition to modern war. And, none of the participants or observers quite knew how different it had become.
Right.
So to me, that would have been really kind of amazing to see everybody reacting to the seriousness of, war was always deadly, but the scale and scope of the damage that could now be inflicted.
Ooh. Wow. Yeah, that would be interesting.
By the time you get to Gettysburg, everybody knows what the game is.
Well,
It's not a surprise. It's just, how's it going to go?
Yeah, everybody always goes to Gettysburg and Antietam or whatever, but Bull Run, that would be interesting. But yeah, you're right. I'd rather, if I'm shooting, I want to be shooting the photos, nothing else, and I don't want anybody shooting back at me. So forget that. Scott, thanks a lot. It's been a true honor, and I'll send you the links for the other podcast probably sometime today and how that works, because I would love to get you on that one as well.
Sure, Rich, this has been a lot of fun. I love the questions, and stay cool there in D.C.
Oh, I will be. Thanks a lot.